Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby, tell
Hey there, welcome to Powered by Backers. Sorry, it's One Take, powered by backers. It's been a couple weeks since I've done this. Justin Fox, Jeff Dennis. Jeff, thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here, Justin. Great to meet you, and glad to be aboard.
Awesome. So I'll do a quick little intro. Like I said, it's been a couple weeks. I think we're in around 100 episodes. We're doing this for about a year now, but it took a couple weeks off. But so Jeff, you are the entrepreneur in residence at Fasken. You're a lawyer, a serial entrepreneur, best-selling author, and public speaker. You work with fast-growing entrepreneurial companies, assisting them with commercialization strategy and finance. You've worked with hundreds of companies in a wide range of industries, including real estate, film and television, natural resources, financial services, franchising, and cosmetics, as well as all types of tech companies, clean tech, med tech, prop tech, not sure what that is, but fintech, blockchain, and cryptocurrency, AI, and machine learning, to name a few. Jeff, thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for the introduction.
So where should we start then?
I guess I'm just ADD, right? Like I'm chasing whatever.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. Yeah, exactly. I add the H in mine, the hyper part, but yeah, ADHD. But yeah, welcome to the club. So tell us where should we? I usually jump in, sort of like a choose your own adventure. So do you want to go back to the?
Well, why don't we start? Yeah, why don't we start at the beginning? Because I think people will find my background interesting just because it's so unusual, and I'm definitely the oddball at Fasken, which is part of my charm, I suppose. Okay. But I am a lawyer. I went to law school. Was practiced law very briefly many years ago. Realized I came from sort of an entrepreneurial family and realized that I was destined to be in business and be an entrepreneur. So in 1989, so a long time ago, I started a business with some partners, and we were essentially a boutique investment bank. We raised lots of money over 25 years. For the reason you said so many different industries is we were really industry agnostic, and so we worked with companies from really a variety of industries, and I was sort of the adult supervision in our company because I was a lawyer, because of just my nature. So I kind of ran our company. I ran the investments, dealt with the lawyers when there was problems. I might have been, the interim CEO or chief restructuring guy or something like that. So I was very hands-on in our business. And along the way, because I'd gone to law school and not business school, I was looking for continuing education and personal growth. And I came upon an organization which is today called EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. Okay. And I drank the Kool-Aid and got very involved. And that was really my business school. And I, learned a lot about business. And through that, ended up writing a book. It's called Lessons from the Edge, and it's a collection of stories by members of EO of their biggest screw-ups in business and the lessons they learned. Right. And because it really, resonated with that audience of entrepreneurs who were, up at night looking at the ceiling, worrying about those exact, problems. Right. We sold a lot of books, and it was a bestseller. I like to say that I had my 15 minutes of fame 17 years ago. I was just gonna say, when was that? Okay, so you were ahead of the curve almost in that entrepreneurial space. Yes, and so when I sold my business around the same time, I started doing some angel investing and sort of being a professional mentor, sitting on boards, advisory boards, working with early stage entrepreneurs to help them to take these businesses to the next level, learn what I'd learned and share the lessons that I either through my own efforts or through the research of the book, really share what I learned. But the biggest sort of problem at the time was that I was working from this exact home office, and I was like climbing the walls and needed to get out. And I started looking for not even a job or anything, just like shared space.
Right.
This was before WeWorks and all of that.
Right.
And anyhow, I bumped into a buddy of mine at Fasken, and they were struggling with the question, how does big traditional law do business with these emerging companies?
Right.
Expensive lawyers and intimidating offices, and these companies need help and have no money.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, every so often, we get a unicorn, get a Shopify or whatever.
Right.
So they were struggling to try and figure that out. Anyhow, long story short, I joined them as the world's first entrepreneur in residence in a law firm. And I kind of wear three hats. I'm part intrapreneur, building this business inside the law firm, offering legal services to these very early stage companies. I'm part business advisor because I coach the companies and help them with finance and strategy and really, the things that I've learned along the way, my network, of course.
Right.
And then lastly, I suppose I'm a lawyer, but I'm surrounded by lots of really smart guys like our mutual friend, Reed.
Just going to talk about, Reed Crombie. Yeah, exactly. We just found that out.
So I delegate most of the legal work to them.
Right.
So today, it's been over 9 years. Today we have 40 lawyers full-time across Canada focused on this space. Reed, being one of them. And, we deal with literally hundreds of companies. And they, I'm industry agnostic. So any given day I'm dealing with a med tech company or a fintech or something in crypto, or could be a dating app, sharing economy, you name it. So I'm really quite a generalist, but we have so much, specialty expertise that I can pull together some pretty good people to help move things forward.
That's awesome. It's interesting you mentioned Reed. I mean, Reed and I grew up together, good friends. We just before out here, we found out that we knew sort of common, acquaintance with Reed. I've actually had conversations about bringing Reed in. So I don't know if you know really what Backers is, but we're just about to announce the acquisition of an exempt market dealership, and we're becoming essentially Canada's first digital asset investment bank. So we're going to facilitate sort of cryptocurrencies, what we call crypto stocks, and the whole sort of digital asset class as an investment bank here in Canada. So that's kind of what Backers is. And I've actually been sort of waiting for Reed to come back so we can start engaging him and sort of bringing him into the fold with both Backers and another organization that I run, the 3HL, which is a 3-on-3 pro hockey league. So interesting time. So
he mentioned the 3-on-3 to me once.
That's me as well.
Well, we can certainly help you. I chair our firm's blockchain and cryptocurrency, we call it a task force, but we have a whole team of lawyers. We've acted for quite a number of players in the crypto space, from exchanges to ICOs to really some traditional businesses that are incorporating it. So we've got a pretty strong team. So that's exciting.
We should definitely connect after this. Now that I know this, and we can sort of connect the dots a little bit.
Well, Toronto is one of the blockchain centers of the world because of the Ethereum. So we're surrounded by some really smart people in the space, and Fasken was an early adopter, I suppose, in terms of getting involved and trying to understand at least the legal implications of this.
We've been sort of working on it for probably about 5 years now. It's been an ongoing process building out the Backers platform. It started with the 3-on-3 league. I was looking for ways. I have sort of a mixed background as well, sort of finance, a bit of healthcare, did an MBA, phys ed degree. So, very, very mixed space, but was looking to fund the teams in the 3HL and came across the concept of kind of equity crowdfunding, sort of, allowing the everyday retail investor to invest in private equity. I thought that was a great opportunity looking at, I don't know if you're a sports fan, kind of the Green Bay Packers model of, that community owned team. So I started going down that path in around 2015, 2016. And, that was sort of the advent of backers, and we incorporated backers in 2018. But then we started to incorporate the blockchain kind of, security token, sort of the securitization or tokenization through the use of blockchain technology and cryptography. So that's, interesting. So we should definitely talk about that. This is not for us to talk about that right now. Let's talk about you. So one of the things I kind of mentioned in your bio, prop tech. What's prop tech? I'm not familiar.
It's technology to do with property. So real estate.
Oh,
technology.
real estate. Okay, makes sense.
So
yes, yeah, in one ear out, or like over my head. Yeah.
Right. So building automation and
right.
management and tenant management and
right.
systems automation, and it's real estate's one of the last industries to become sort of technical.
Right. Yeah, it's tough because it's it's sort of physical, right? It's a physical property entity, so it's tough to automate. I know there's obviously internally the automation around energy consumption and whatnot, but
even construction techniques are 100 years old, right?
Okay.
Like if you watch them put up a building, it's so we're seeing
one floor at a time kind of thing, right? Yeah.
So so that's one of, but it's starting to happen in sort of a younger generation, and also consumers demand better experiences. So the technology has to come along. So anyhow, that's what prop tech is.
Cool.
So when I started, there was a tech industry, and then there was a real estate industry and a mining industry and whatever.
Right.
Today, every industry is a tech industry.
Everything.
Every single industry.
Everything overlaps, right? So I was going to ask you one of the things that you had just said earlier. What is the, I guess, if you wrote the book, right? You said 17 years ago, close to, what was it called? Close to the Edge?
Lessons from the Edge.
Lessons from the Edge. So give me a couple, like the worst stories that you've heard that while writing that book of entrepreneurs, right on the edge. Because I think a lot of people, like, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I myself have been an entrepreneur and, somewhat of a serial entrepreneur. I understand that, it's very difficult, can be very lonely at times. What are some of the stories that, I won't say horror stories, but some of the stories, like you said, at the edge there, that you've come across that would be interesting, that someone might learn from in this if they're watching this?
Yeah, well, there were 50 stories, so there's a lot, and it really depends on what the challenge that people are facing in the moment. But what I think I would share, there's sort of 5 chapters of the book, and then there's sort of like, what's the big lesson out of each chapter?
Right.
People seem to like to know what I think that is, and so the first chapter is about leadership.
Okay.
And the lesson was pretty simple. I mean, all the stories kind of pointed to the same thing. It was about having a vision,
right,
and sticking with it. And a lot of businesses, ADD, we talked about it earlier.
The wavering.
That's probably one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur. Is that they do focus on many different things, and so it's important to have a vision.
Right.
The second chapter was about people. And lots of problems with people, as you can imagine, employees, things like that. But the key lesson that we learned was that, hire slow and fire fast.
Right. Okay.
That, people, especially in a fast growth company, are just throwing people sometimes who they know or went to school with into roles, and not really looking at the bigger picture and fit and culture and a lot of the important things. And then, at the other end, if it's not working out, people are afraid to lose the person because they don't think they'll be replaced, or anyhow, fire fast, because the damage that the wrong person causes to the business far exceeds the disruption of getting rid of them.
Right.
The third chapter was about finance. And again, people had money stolen, people, all sorts of stories about finance and money. But the big lesson, I think, and it really applies to most entrepreneurs, is raise more than you need and spend less than you have. It always costs more to get these business off the ground.
Right, right.
And you're going to feel like an idiot if you're driving around in a Porsche when you go to bankruptcy court. So, you know, that's the big lesson there.
Right.
The fourth chapter was about partners. And, you know, we could have written an entire book about partners because, you know, every business, every entrepreneur has some partner, you know, because they're lacking resources, so they bring in people. But the problem with the partners is that, you know, however little time you spend, you know, hiring employees, ironically, people spend even less time thinking about who these partners are.
Right.
And what we found was there was a lot, you know, they're focused on the business and the, you know, the upside, but they're not focused on the relationship. And, you know, what's your vision? What are your ethics? You know, they have, you know, what's the timeline? What are the skill sets? So just making sure that you've got the right partners, because that, and get it in writing was another big one.
Right.
Of course, that's a bit self-serving from coming from a lawyer, but it's true. Like if you don't have shareholders agreements and all of that, it kills the business.
Right.
And then the last chapter was on sort of the personal side. And I guess the lesson was listen to your mother, you know, eat well, sleep, you know, have some spirituality in your life, have some balance in your life. There were lots of stories about people, they went over the edge because they just didn't have didn't have work-life balance. So, you know, those are sort of the big lessons. I mean, again, there's 5 chapters, 10 lessons per chapter, so there's 50 stories. Right. And it's interesting. One last comment I would make about the book is that, ironically, during the pandemic, I had a bit of a reunion with some of the storytellers in the book. Okay. We showed up on this networking platform by coincidence. Right. And like one evening, we're on this, they call them deal huddles, where you know, what do you need? What do you got? And there's 10 or 15 people. Well, half of them were stories in my book. Okay. And it's never happened before. But what was interesting is all these people had recovered and gone to greater heights. Right. And, you know, one of the guys who, you know, has got a pretty tough story in the book, I can tell you that I follow him on Facebook, and he's sitting in his yacht in Exuma in Bahamas right now. So, you know, he's taken it completely the other way. Right. From having this, you know, a problem with a partner who basically stole the business out from under him. Okay. But he recovered and grew it bigger and better, and then sold it and is sitting on his yacht. So, you know, there's some really inspiring stories. I was thinking of doing the sequel, just like where I was just going to say, what about like part 2, right? Part 2 of the book, or even another 50 stories, you know, 15 years late, 17 years later, or like you said, part 2 of where they are now, kind of, right? It's sort of like one of those, you know, HBO specials, right? Where are they now? Yeah, well, I did I updated my contact list. Like I decided during the pandemic, you know, so before the sports came back to life, I had nothing to do in the evenings. Yeah. So I literally tracked down, I think I got about 45 or 50. So I've got emails, and I think I'm going to do something with it, but I'm not sure what yet. That'd be cool. So I guess, and then you said there was sort of the 5 chapters and then kind of like an overarching like lesson. What was that lesson that was all brought it together? Well, I guess the real lesson is that people make the same mistakes. Like there aren't, you know, they're not making up new mistakes. People tend to make the same mistakes. And so why is that? And I think the answer is that they lack resources. So they're making decisions with limited resources, whether it's time or money or, you know, business intelligence. So they're making decisions flying blind, and then, you know, the mistakes get made. Yeah. Usually somewhat out of necessity though, right? That's kind of like, you know, often that's the plight of an entrepreneur, right? You've got, you know, you've got the idea. That's why we wrote. Yeah, that's why we wrote the book, right? Like you can read about it before you do it, because
Right.
maybe if you see somebody's story, as you start to see the telltale signs,
Right.
you know, you might be able to prevent making the same mistake. So that was the whole idea.
Yeah.
The book came out of a series, like a seminar series I used to do at the EO conventions, which they call universities. And I
Right.
would get a panel of people who would tell their war stories.
Right.
And so it was the highest rated event at each one of these conferences, because everybody in the audience, this is what they're up at night worrying about. So
Right.
it really, you know,
So resonates
resonated,
with
and I
them,
was
yeah.
able.
Yeah.
So that's about the book, and yeah, it's people still buy it. And the other thing I find is that it's the lessons are universal. Like it's the same story no matter where people live, and even with technology, like I'm sure it's like everything else. The lessons, the mistakes get made. Like, you know, stealing now is digital. It's, you know, it's identity theft, not
Right.
just, you know, kiting checks.
Right.
But you know, it's the same problem: lack of control and, you know, lack of integrity.
Yeah.
So those principles are pretty universal and timeless, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're gonna find sort of bad apples in any space, right? They just find different ways to go about it. It's interesting. One, I don't know if I made this quote up, but I put it on everything. It's like, you can't learn from your mistakes if you don't make any, right? And so I talk about like perseverance, persistence. You know, you're gonna make mistakes, but be able to learn from them and kind of move on is definitely one of the things that I look at. So that's interesting. So I'd love to see version 2. Actually, I want to check out version 1. Can people buy it still? Like, can they get it? Is it on Amazon?
Yeah,
or
it's
where?
on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my bookshelf. I guess I shouldn't walk away, but I'll share.
That's okay. This is very informal. Maybe do you have any extra copies? Do you have any extra copies? We could give one away to a listener.
I don't.
No.
I don't. This is. Here's the book.
Lessons from the Edge.
So here's the book in Thai.
Okay. It looks like a can of soup.
And here's the audio book in Russian.
Wow. Yeah. The blur is kind of
So
making it
yeah,
blurry.
I don't know exactly how that happens, but I would every so often I'd get, like in the mail, I'd get a book from like another language. So I didn't even know how many languages it was translated into, but yeah,
That's cool.
it's funny how the book publishing business works. Anyhow,
Yeah. Awesome. So where do you go now? So that's the beginning. Where are you going now? Like what do you see?
Well, my day to day, I sort of wear two hats. I'm very committed to my role at Fasken, and it's been sort of a 9-year journey. But because of my previous life, I continue to sit on some boards and some advisory boards, and I do some philanthropy and a little bit of personal investing. So so I have some activities that are outside of Fasken, but
Right.
the lion's share of my life is focused on building that practice and
Right.
really helping these companies. So I'm, my day to day is I'm usually talking to entrepreneurs and hearing their stories, and usually it's positive in the sense that I need this amount of money to build this.
Right.
Sometimes it's negative because they get themselves in a jam, and we've got to help sort that out.
Yeah.
But it's the biggest challenge that they face is raising capital.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And that's kind of, I think, where the backers platform comes in. We can definitely talk about that off air. I guess one question I wanted to ask you, seeing that you do deal with a lot, and you mentioned the blockchain sort of task force. A lot of people, I would say most people, are not familiar, at least the general public, are not familiar with sort of blockchain. I mean, everyone's heard of Bitcoin. I would say even the majority of people don't even really know much about it. Needless to say that the underlying technology of blockchain and the impacts it can have. What would you say? Like, I don't know what my question is. My question is more like, what are your thoughts on sort of, I would say Bitcoin and sort of cryptocurrency as potentially currency. I think right now it doesn't have the potential. If you want my opinion, it has the long-term potential, but no one's going to buy something with Bitcoin today because it could be worth 5x tomorrow, and the thing they're buying is probably not going to, appreciate in value as at that same rate. So it's tough to make it a currency today. But where do you see it long term, and where do you see other maybe like stable coins or other currency alternatives, or even the security side of blockchain? Where do you see that space going, or what are your thoughts in general? I kind of led you in a direction, but I'd love you to give me your thoughts, not my thoughts. Go ahead.
How much time do we have?
We have as much time as you want. My kids are in class next to me here doing online schooling, so I got all afternoon. Yeah.
So there's a trend going on in the world. There's, it's like it's I don't know if it's another revolution or it's a next iteration of the digital revolution, but the big trend is decentralization.
Right. DeFi.
And blockchain and Bitcoin is the engine of decentralization. Not so much Bitcoin, but blockchain, like that technology enables decentralization.
Yeah.
So that's big, because what it means is it's going to take the economy further down the road towards disintermediation, getting rid of the middlemen.
Right. Trustless economy, right?
Creator. Well, it's direct. It's going to get rid of all the middlemen. You're not going to need manufacturer, wholesaler, local distributor, retailer, consumer. Consumer can deal with creator directly because of this decentralized world. And what blockchain does is provide a giant ledger in the sky that's decentralized on different computers. So it's highly secure and it's accurate. So we have certainty and security. So any transaction, we know that it's valid. So that's important because it facilitates commerce online and offline around the world with, like you said, with trust and without friction.
Right.
So that's a big trend. Like when you see this GameStop thing, that's decentralization. That's, the investment banks losing control to the little guy on Reddit.
Right.
Right. So you're seeing like the election and like Trump going around mainstream media and using social media is another example of decentralization. So this is a global trend. So that's where the world is going. There's only, I think what it then does is creates these digital assets, and some of them have a use case and some of them don't.
Right.
And then we'll find out, like the dog coin or whatever it's called, Elon Musk's, his pet project, that's they're just gaming the system right now. There's no function utility for that. So, I mean,
it's up 30% in the past. Up 30% in the past 24 hours. It just got listed on Coinbase. I think the thing with Dogecoin is, and it's similar to Bitcoin in that the idea is that it's the value is so little that it could potentially be used as a currency because it only is worth 30 or 50 cents or whatever. I mean, it's at 50 cents, I think today, Canadian, that somebody might pay in Dogecoin, but I think it still holds that long-term investment. So so I look at it this way: if someone's got $1, they're going to pay $1 and they're going to get whatever that dollar, whatever they can get for that dollar, or $2 or $5 or $20. But if that dollar is going to be worth $2 tomorrow and you have the ability to potentially see that growth, you're not going to spend that dollar for something that's worth $1 today, right? You're going to find some other way to get that product. That's the problem with cryptocurrencies right now.
Well, I agree with you that it's not a currency because of the volatility, like you said.
And that too, yeah.
But it's still an asset.
It is definitely
a digital asset.
Yes.
And its value is based on supply and demand.
Of course.
So if there's more demand, the price goes up. If there's more supply, the price goes down. So, I don't know whether it's going to be, where's the demand going to be for these tokens? Bitcoin has one purpose. Like, you can't build smart contracts on top of Bitcoin's blockchain, but you can with Ethereum. And there's other blockchains that have utility and have a use case. And then some cryptocurrency will be attributed to some, bricks and mortar assets. So you'll tokenize or securitize assets. So, if you buy this token, it represents an interest in this gold mine, or an interest in this pot of gold, or an interest in, this cash flow.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Right now what's happening is inventive and innovative people are coming up with use cases.
Right.
So we'll see where where it settles. But, I believe that there will be many use cases for blockchain technology, and therefore there's going to be demand for some cryptocurrencies, and some may evolve into currencies, actual currencies, and some will just become, a set of an asset class.
A store of
value. And the more mainstream it becomes, it creates more demand. So if there's, hedge funds that are buying it, and not just the hodl crowd, of anarchists, all of a sudden that's more demand.
Right.
So as long as demand keeps growing, prices would, in theory, go up.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's so with backers, that's what we've kind of, I mean, you mentioned sort of the property side. So like the NFTs, non-fungible tokens, would be that kind of, potentially on some of those asset classes. What we've kind of focused most of our efforts is on the security kind of tokens, right? Securitization of an asset, right? The underlying value of an asset. You mentioned the cash flow of some sort of property or project or whatever, or the underlying shares, the actual tokenization of the stock or share in a company, right? So now the interoperability between being able to trade that share maybe for a Bitcoin or for some other, so it becomes this like almost like interoperable trading between these two markets, right? And so people will buy and sell between them, with both of them having underlying potential growth or growth potential. That's, I agree with the asset class. There's so many other ways. You talked about supply chain, the blockchain around like taking the, from the, the creator to the, the end user or consumer, right? And following that whole supply chain, especially in the medical space. I've seen, some applications around, medical equipment and I guess procurement around, sort of the supply chain of medical equipment procurement within, hospitals and the healthcare space. So there's definitely a lot of applications there for sure. Do you guys, here's a question. Do you hold any crypto personally?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which ones do you hold? I mean, you don't have to disclose numbers or amounts, but what? Yeah.
I'm not a trader. Like I believe in Ethereum.
Okay. Yeah. I hold some Ethereum as well. It's had some struggles lately, but yeah, it's definitely the long-term play. You look at some of the protocols that are being built on Ethereum, like a Matic or Polygon, and different sort of that layer 2. You mentioned Bitcoin has the omni-channel, so you can start to potentially build out some smart contracts or at least functionality into the Bitcoin blockchain. Do you guys work with
Ethereum,
No, with both. You can use the omni-channel to start to build out some not full-on smart contracts, but there is that layer that you can add onto the Bitcoin blockchain. But definitely Ethereum has the smart contract capabilities. We use, like I said, the ERC sort of 20 compliant ERC 1404 protocol to build out the security tokens, which basically restricts essentially the transferability of who can buy and sell the token, which then makes them regulatorily compliant, right? So they adhere to, in Ontario, the OSC or wherever it is, right? The SEC in the US. So build out, we're sort of jurisdiction agnostic. So where do you see where do you see this is a question I have personally, and I think it'd be interesting to ask you, where do you see so we talked about the intermediaries, where do you see the law in sort of the decentralization? Where do you see the law sector, if you will, or the legal around sort of corporate law, securities law, like to get to DeFi, like true decentralized finance, right? You have to almost over, go over, and exceed kind of where the regulatory constraints are right now. Where do you see that, like in the legal space? Like, what are people talking about on your end that because for us, and I know a lot of people look at it like, what are the steps? Maybe this is a long question, I apologize. Hopefully you're kind of following where I'm going, but like, what are the steps that go from where we're at today, where regulators aren't sure what to do with it? The legal side there's a lot of gray area, where regulators will probably start to become even more involved. So it becomes even more somewhat centralized, if you will. How do we get beyond that to that decentralization?
I don't think you do. I think first of all, I think regulators have figured it out. I mean, what you said might have been true 5 or 6 years ago, but today they've got test cases, they've,
Right.
Charged people, they've made announcements, they've got task forces. I mean, they know what's going on.
Right.
Some of it they can't control because it's in the ether, and you can't get your arms around it. But the law is the law. Like I don't think we're going to see changes to sort of principles, and the principles are really like, how do you protect the little guy? Right. Like if you look at securities laws, it's all about
Investors
protecting the little guy,
right?
The investors. So
right.
That's not going to change. The methods of enforcement might change, but I don't think the principles will change. The other problem is that, if you want to break the law and you want to be a rebel and ignore the law, then you can't live in most countries.
I was going to say,
right?
You have to move to Malta or wherever, right?
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because, if you're selling an ICO in
right.
Ontario to Ontario residents, but the OSC is going to come knocking on your door.
Right.
They're going to freeze your bank account. They're going to arrest you. They're going to charge so. And the SEC is worse. I mean, in
right.
terms of somebody to be afraid of. And Ripple is being, there's a test case today. And it'll be interesting. So, like when people come to see us, we don't recommend that you break the law. Like,
of course,
you're going to have to go live on an island somewhere and never come here. Like,
right.
Like some of those, the gambling, back in the day where they had.
We won't say names, but our friend Reed has been to an island in the Caribbean meeting with a client who started a sports betting site, right?
Something like that. So yeah, so if you're prepared to live, don't want to live here, don't want to live in the US, don't want to live in the UK, there's most of the countries where most people live, then you can go be a pirate or a rebel. Yeah. But that's a tough life.
So the question, I guess my question is, and this is what I mean, I agree with you 100%. I agree that the regulated space and the regulated side of things is where we're going. But I think there is a portion of the people, especially in this space. You mentioned sort of the anarchist side of it, and I realize that it's never going to go to that extreme. But the whole concept of decentralized, right? Just decentralized. Forget finance part, but decentralization, especially around sort of the securities and regulatory side. How does it ever get to that? And you're saying probably doesn't.
No, Bernie Madoff got away with it for 15 years and they finally caught up to it. the same thing is going to happen. Like somebody's going to get cocky and step off a plane, and boom, you're now in jail.
But
you
is
know,
that the same
you're-
though? I mean, Bernie Madoff's, I mean, that's, because I think that where I'm kind of going with this, I'm not saying the criminal aspect of it where it would be completely blatantly against, the law, right? Or going against the regulatory side. I'm just wondering, is there a path that regulators, let's just use a, kind of a hypothetical where regulators maybe step out of the way and just, or at least they make kind of like very blanket regulatory, rules that essentially allow for that full decentralization. No,
I don't believe so. I think that they're going to try and have more regulation, not less. And I don't think it's in the interest of governments. They don't want decentralization because it's like, look what happened to Wall Street with GameStop. Like, you lose the control. So there'll be a battle, and we'll see how it. But I don't think they're going to ease up. I think it's good. They're going to double down. Like, I wouldn't take them on.
no,
Because,
of course not.
Listen, if your cryptocurrency is not a security, then you don't have to worry about securities laws, right? So if it's a so-called utility token and it has a real purpose, then you can raise money like any other business and sell it, and there's no securities issue if it's not a security. The only other issue is whether your business, like if you're running an exchange or something like that, is whether you're a money services business, which means you're regulated because they're worried about anti-money laundering and FinTrack and all that. That's it. So if you're a money services business, so long as you don't deal with terrorists and the like and criminals, then you do, you track do AML, anti-money laundering, and know your client, which is not that high a bar, then that's you're cool. But if you're selling securities to the public, then you got to comply to the securities law where the investor resides. So if you're selling cryptocurrencies to Canadians that are securities, you have to comply with Canadian securities law, etc.
Definitely.
And there's not much you can do with it. And we've seen, like, there's cases. It's not unclear anymore. It's pretty clear what a security is. And we'll know more after the Ripple case. We'll see how far it goes. But we do know, like, for example, from the British Columbia Securities Commission, they said that CryptoKitties was not a security.
Okay.
So
it's a collectible,
I don't know
right?
where the line. Well, yeah. So it's an NFT, and it was a collectible. So they didn't think it was a security. I don't know if they would change their mind today or something. There was something unique about it. I don't know enough about the story, the case. But the point is that there are tokens that are not securities, and therefore you can sell them. Just like you got to charge HST, like it's a product.
Like a hockey card or something, almost.
Well, I'm a photographer, so I've been creating my own NFTs. Out of some of my photography. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But I just said, what the heck? Let's see what happens, right? But they're unique. They're one of a kind. Digital. I mean, it's my creation, so maybe it's not worth $69 million, but you never know.
Hey, it's the start of summer, but we should get your links for your NFTs and start selling them.
But my photos are not a security.
Yeah, they're a collectible. So I mean, I think I forget the exact term, but there's the what in the US to determine a security, it's is it a guy's name or something? The something rule. Anyways, but there's sort of the one thing that we look at, and I mean, by the way, so we're an MSB and an EMD, so we have sort of the both.
The Howey
test, right? The Howey rule, yeah. So one of those though around the NFTs that I think is interesting is that because there's no, I think, commerce or nothing that's being done by any individual person to increase the value of that underlying token or NFT, it's not a security. If there's some sort of commercial entity that's working behind the scenes to improve the value of it, then it becomes a security.
I'm not sure that's the test, but
that's part of it.
But
that's part of it.
I don't. That may be a factor, but
right.
There's a lot of like the Howey test has, I think, 4 parts.
4 parts. Yeah.
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's more complicated than that. Like for example, if you created let's say you created an NFT and built in a smart contract that provided like some kind of return, every time somebody went to the museum and put money in the tip box to take a look at the piece of work of art, the owner would get 10% through some smart. I'm making this up, right?
Right.
Well, the fact that it has a yield might make it into a security, whereas without the yield, if you just buy it, it's not. It may not be. So it's not as cut and dry, and it depends on the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
And that's why you need a good lawyer, good securities lawyer. And the law differs in each jurisdiction, so it might be different in BC than Ontario and the US. And
exactly. Right? So one of the things, so like you have real estate, so the actual property itself is not a security, but then if you're managing the property, providing some sort of cash flow, as you said, through your efforts, that becomes then a security, right? If you start selling that second asset component, right? The cash flow. So I mean, I pulled it up quickly here. So it says, if it's an investment of money, there's an expectation of profits from the investment. And then the investment of money is in a common enterprise. So the key word is the enterprise, right? And then any profit comes from the efforts of a promoter or a third party. So it's sort of like those efforts in an enterprise, which make it the security side versus, a collectible doesn't have the efforts and it's not an enterprise. It's just a standalone entity, right?
Well, think of it like the easy case is where somebody says, okay, I'm going to create a blockchain solution for some med tech problem, logistics, supply chain, whatever. And I'm going to raise $10 million and issue a bunch of tokens in exchange for your $10 million.
Those are securities.
Right, because you have a common enterprise. You're built, right? You're expecting a return. Right. Like so that's an easy case. The harder case is when people get really kind of creative and start slicing and dicing things. And then that's where securities lawyers, their heads explode, because that's they're either afraid or they're excited, depending on if they're conservative or creative types.
Right. Well, we should definitely talk more off air. Jeff, I really appreciate you joining me. Very insightful. I don't want to take all of your time here. Usually I ended off on sort of one. I like to choose your own adventure. I'm going to ask you both questions. Usually it's kind of like you're on a cliff, final words, what are you going to say? Or what would be sort of one word or one piece of advice? They almost kind of intertwine that you would give to like a younger you, or maybe somebody coming up in the world today that's starting out. Choose those. Those are the two questions. You can choose them as one.
Well, I'll choose the second one. I'll choose the second one because I get a lot of young people coming to me for career advice. Not sure why, because my career has been sort of
that's good, isn't that sort of flattery that they see your experience. I guess, and I have a bunch of things I'll say to them depending on the situation. But the one thing I always say is ride the waves, don't fight them. Right.
And that life and business is full of waves. And you don't want to be fighting against this wave and what are the trends in business today? I talked about decentralization. Like you'd rather be riding the wave of decentralization rather than be a centralized business trying to fight the wave.
Right.
I mean, that's a simple kind of analysis, but in many, there's demographic waves, there's industrial trends, like there's a COVID,
Yeah.
I heard all sorts of restaurants whose business survival strategy was begging, right? They begged for survival. They got money from the government. They, emailed their customers and begged them for business. They got on Uber Eats, you can give the restaurant an extra $2. Like that's
yeah.
begging,
Yeah.
right? Like that's a business survival strategy. That's fighting the wave. I have another friend who said, okay, this is a mess. And he started opening ghost kitchens and doing delivery without real estate. He took other people's kitchens capacity and added different, and so he had manufacturing of food, no storefront, no real estate.
Right.
Like, so all of a sudden now he's decentralized, right? And so which is a better approach? One guy is fighting the wave, begging for tips, and the other guy disrupted the whole thing and pivoted his business to take advantage of this wave of decentralization and all the excess real estate and the restaurants that had excess capacity and the fact that we were all home ordering Uber Eats. And I don't know where the hell the food comes from anymore. I don't go to the restaurant. It just shows up at my door. It could come out of somebody's basement.
Yeah.
So, like that's a good example of riding versus fighting a wave. I had a guy come see me about 6 years ago with an app for taxis.
For what?
They were going to get taxis.
Oh, taxis? Okay.
Yeah. So they were going to get like Beck Taxi and Diamond Taxi to compete with Uber by having an app. That's fighting a wave.
Right.
Like that's coming to me with a buggy whip investment when the Model T Ford's rolling off the line.
Right. Yeah. It's like my business partner said something like, if the dinosaurs knew they were going extinct, they would have done something, right? So it's sort of that also, like, people, it's tough when you're, especially like when you're in the, like, I think it's kind of different from what you're saying, but sort of applies when you're in the sort of the industry that's being kind of disrupted. It's tough to really pivot at times.
They never see it.
Exactly. It's tough.
They never see it.
Yeah.
What's his name? Clayton Christensen said it in the Innovator's Dilemma. They never see it coming.
Right.
Like, look at the Toronto Star. It sold out of bankruptcy for $46 million.
Yeah.
Because they're fighting a wave.
Yeah.
And they can just see the value. So ride the waves, don't fight them. I think that's the best advice. So for young people, try to figure out what
you got to figure out the wave, though. That's sort of that's kind of the interesting part, right? Is I think a lot of people, especially, I think younger, when you're starting out, it's easier to sort of identify from like a whatever 1,000-mile view or whatever than it is when you're in the trenches trying to figure out what to do next as an existing sort of institution in that industry. So it's interesting to sort of see, how do you identify? We could have a whole other conversation about identifying trends and identifying the wave, but definitely agree. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you joining me. We should definitely jump on a call especially when Reed's back. Maybe jump on a Zoom call. I'd love to connect with you guys. For both us and a lot of the companies that we're working with need, obviously, people like you guys to support them and guide them through the process. So Jeff, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Awesome.
Talk to you soon. Take care.
Perfect. Everyone else, this is One Take, powered by backers, Justin Fox, Jeff Dennis. I'll see you guys again very soon. Thanks, Jeff. Awesome. Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby.